Hi guys, I'm coming in for today's video. First off, I guess I should also mention Happy St. Patrick's Day to anyone that is celebrating it, and hopefully everyone is staying clear of the raging little overhyped pandemic that's going on right now, but hopefully you're all staying clear of that. For today's topic video, I chose a topic that basically was actually recommended to me by someone in the comments, and it will be over the impeachment of President Bill Clinton. I will not do the more recent one, only out of fear of political things. Well, also to state that I know I mentioned in the previous video that I would be doing one on Spanish flu, and that will be coming. That will either be coming on Thursday or Friday. I have not decided which day yet. Depends on how fast I can get the info. So I will definitely update that in the discussion board on the channel as soon as I can. Now, to start the topic of Bill Clinton's impeachment, we're going to discuss basically the entire round off. We're going to go from how this began, what led to it, what charges were made, the trial, and then the eventual verdict. We'll cover everything in this. I've collected most of the info that I could find on my notebook here. There was so much info in this that I actually did not know myself that I had to look a lot of this up. And this is one of the rare topics I actually don't know too much about. Like, I've never really looked in depth to it. So very frequently I will be looking at my notebook here to look and get the info that I need for this video. Well, basically, to start off this video, in order to understand President Bill Clinton's impeachment, we have to go back to 1994. And this was before any of this broke out. This was during Clinton's first term in office, within his first year of office. He was elected in 1993 after beating President George H.W. Bush in the election of 1992. Well, anyway, this started back in 1994, and a woman, a former Arkansas state employee by the name of Paula Jones, basically she had filed a lawsuit against Bill Clinton in an Arkansas court. And she had claimed that she had been sexually harassed by the president during his term of office back in 1991 when he was governor of Arkansas at the time. Now, Clinton, of course, denied this, and no, he really didn't acknowledge that much was going on. And to other people, it just seemed like another common case of, like, every president that's ever gone into a presidential office, be it Donald Trump, be it Bill Clinton, be it Ronald Reagan, be it Richard Nixon, be it all these other presidents, be it Barack Obama even, I think, they've all had someone that's come across saying they sexually harassed them, or in some form they've all had these charges against them. So it wasn't exactly uncommon to hear this. Well, Clinton kind of really didn't want to deal with the trial with Paula Jones during his tenure in office. He actually wanted to delay it until after he left office, and he knew full well that if I get a second term, I can delay this for 8 years, and hopefully maybe she'll drop it by then, I think was what his strategy was. Well, unfortunately, Clinton kind of based this off his little idea that as president, he was immune from any civil lawsuit, that he could not be tried in a civil lawsuit as long as he was president. Well, this was struck down in May 1997. The Supreme Court had a case between Jones and Clinton, Jones versus Clinton, that basically stated this was not the case, that the president was not immune to such things, and that he very well could do this. And so, because of this, within a month, the trial really started to open up, and Jones was still in Arkansas. She was filing with an Arkansas state court, and she kind of her little claim was that during a meeting in May of 1991, that she'd been ordered to go to the governor's office, which was Clinton at the time. And while she was in this office talking to him, that he had indecently exposed himself to her and tried to make advances on her, which of course she claimed that she did not like, that she was not consensual or nothing. She tried to get away. He just kind of pressed himself on her. And so she claimed that this had happened. Now, Jones wanted just a money reimbursement, is what she really wanted. She wasn't looking for much else. Well, her lawyers as a defense, they wanted to get other women. They wanted to try to prove to the court that this was not the first case Clinton had done, because there had been other allegations over the years that Clinton had maybe had some inappropriate relationships with other women. And what they really aimed for was they wanted to see if they could get any other accounts of other women that Clinton had had this inappropriate relationship with, to kind of prove that he has a pattern of doing so, so he was probably guilty where Jones was saying he was. And they started this search, her lawyers did. And this was in late 1997, because by this time, the court had finally proven that, and the trial was going to take place. Clinton could not delay it any longer. Well, at this same time, in the other end, on the East Coast, in Washington, D.C., actually in Alexandria, Virginia, do pardon, at the Pentagon, in fact, there was a worker at the Pentagon who was by the name of Linda Tripp. Now, Linda had become friends with a recent new Pentagon employee named Monica Lewinsky. Now, Monica Lewinsky had actually come from the Pentagon. She come to the Pentagon from the White House. She had been an unpaid intern at the White House starting at the age of 21, and she started in 1995. Well, shortly after, Linda kind of really befriended Monica, and they became rapidly good friends. Well, Monica proceeded to inform Linda of a supposed affair or sexual relations that she had with President Bill Clinton, who was in office. And she would kind of talk about this, how he would give her gifts, and she would meet with him at least a couple times, and a couple times they supposedly had sex. Well, eventually, Linda kind of really saw this as almost, knowing that the president was married, of course, and among other reasons, kind of saw this as wrong. And secretly, in the future, she secretly began audio taping her conversations with Monica without Monica knowing. Monica had no idea that she had been not videotaping, but audio taping these conversations of where she would discuss this. And eventually, she had basically gotten enough of these tapes and concern that Linda Tripp, eventually, she kind of heard about the Jones lawsuit, and she actually shared these tapes with Paula Jones's defense team, because they were looking for other women that Clinton supposedly had. And this was valuable to them, because this was not just a past one, this was almost current. That that Bill Clinton, as president of the United States, was still engaging in an inappropriate affair with a woman. Well, after learning of this, the Jones team kind of got a hold of Lewinsky, and they wanted her to be a witness. Now, Lewinsky was kind of cautious to do so, but she kind of agreed that she would. What exactly persuaded her, I don't know. But here's where things kind of started going a little bit shaky. President Bill Clinton kind of found out that Lewinsky had been selected as a witness in the witness list for the Paula Jones case. He kind of discovered this, and immediately, as soon as he really found out, he started to panic, because he knew. I think we all know. Well, basically, what happened was, as soon as Clinton found this out, he started to take certain steps to try to hide the fact that Monica Lewinsky and him had ever had a relationship in the first place. He started to conceal gifts and everything. For example, a lot of stuff that he would do, according to Lewinsky herself and others, he encouraged Lewinsky to really, this is coming from my notes here, so I do pardon if I'm looking off the screen. He was encouraging Lewinsky, according to this, to use cover stories when asked about it in the press or by the lawyers. Bill Clinton also suggested that she file a false affidavit, which she did in January of 1998 in the court. That basically was to misdirect the investigation. This affidavit that was false basically just claimed that she denied ever having an affair with him, even though there really had been, just to try to maybe shake the investigation off. And this was going to come back to haunt Clinton. And we'll get to that later here. But remember this, he made her file a false affidavit in order to mislead an investigation. That's going to be critical. Well, and then on top of that, he personally concealed most of the gifts that he had given her, and she did as well. And he even attempted to aid her in finding a gainful employment job in order to maybe influence her testimony at this trial if she was called to witness. Well, 5 days after Lewinsky filed this affidavit, Linda Tripp then she kind of realized that something was going on here, and she contacted Whitewater Independent Counsel Kenneth Starr, who basically was a prosecutor that was independent. He wasn't Democrat nor Republican at the time. He stood alone, and he was for like presidential prosecution if never needed, which I don't exactly know how that's set up, but he was. And she talked with him about the tapes that she had recorded of Lewinsky's comments and about the affair that Lewinsky kind of claimed that had happened. Well, Starr kind of very well rightly took interest in this, and he actually sent Tripp back to home and to work, but he sent her with FBI after she had been wired by FBI agents under his command. That she was wired, and basically the next day she had encouraged to have another conversation with Monica to try to gain more info while being wired by the FBI so they could hear this. And of course, Tripp did this and ended up getting quite a little bit more info for Starr to use and find out. And this was on January 16th of 1998 by this point. Now, Tripp basically went right back to Starr, to make sure everything was all okay with what she had done, and she had done her part, I suppose it would be the way of saying it. And the very next day, U.S. attorneys and FBI agents, after Kenneth Starr gave them orders, basically they got a hold of Lewinsky in the Pentagon. They took her out of there. Not in handcuffs or nothing, not arresting, but they kind of took her out of there. They took her to a nearby hotel in a room, and they kind of basically discussed with her, and they questioned her, and they basically offered her an immunity if she cooperated with the prosecution. That we'll offer you immunity in this case, but you got to cooperate with the prosecution in this. And of course, Lewinsky ended up taking the bargain. She, of course, didn't want to be put in jail herself, so she, of course, took that bargain and agreed with the deal. Well, on January 17th, this was a day later, Clinton kind of denied, after it started becoming public that he possibly had an affair with this former White House intern. Clinton kind of had press briefings, and he was denying having ever had an affair with her, and his lawyer basically had even stated that the affidavit that Lewinsky had filed in the Paula Jones case had showed, now mind you, this was a false affidavit, but they didn't want public to know that, and at this point it's still not known. But basically his lawyer and himself were basically claiming that the affidavit even showed there was no sex in any manner. That even if they had a relationship, there was no sex in any manner, even if they had known each other. Well, unfortunately, it was also beginning rumored later in the later as these all proceeded, that Clinton was also coaching his secretary Betty Currie into repeating his denials. Actually, she was the secretary inside the White House that would basically allow people in and out of the Oval Office, and he was basically coaching her to repeat any of his denials in case she was called to testify in anything. And I don't think it was ever confirmed, but this was a rumor that was going around that he was doing this. Well, basically just a couple days later, it became public that Clinton had indeed supposedly had this relationship, and Clinton came out actually saying, yes, I did have a relationship with her. But he insisted that there was no sexual relations. There was no acts of that manner. And at the end of a speech presentation on January 26 of 1998, Clinton commented at the end of the presentation to the press, and I'm actually going to try to quote him here, so I don't know how good I'm going to be at this. I'm not exactly good at his voice, but I actually have written down here the exact quote that he says. This is the very famous quote that we all probably know about. So I'm going to try to quote this, so I do pardon if it's a little shaky. But I'm going to try here. This was on January 26, 1998. At the end of this press conference, he had been at Bill Clinton had been asked about the supposed affair, and he kind of said these words. Now, I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie. Not a single time. Never. Sure you didn't, Billy. Sure you didn't. Because guess what? You did! I do apologize. I do apologize. But I had to do that. Well, anyway, after this became really known that Billy had a sexual relationship, whether he denied it or not. In fact, Lewinsky later kind of came out and said that she had been forced to have perform sex on him. If I think we all know what that means, so I'm not going to go further. But anyway, basically, it really started raging in the public, and it also really issued that kind of Starr really started to pursue more information to this because he was thinking of a possible prosecution and possible crimes that Clinton could have committed. And this really started to be a major problem. Now, as for the Paula Jones case, this case was done by this point, kind of, because of the factor the judge in the Paula Jones case here, what I found, ruled that the Lewinsky matter was immaterial to her own case. That although Clinton may have indeed have had an affair with Monica Lewinsky, it had nothing to do with Paula Jones, so it could not be used as evidence in her trial, which I suppose made sense. And the case was then thrown out in April of that year, in 1998, and on the grounds that she had failed to show any damages at all. Now, Jones did appeal the case later that year in November, but by this time, Clinton just really wanted to settle things, is what he claimed. But by this point, I'm pretty sure we know he just couldn't keep the lizard in his pants. But anyway, basically Clinton claimed, yeah, we know, Billy, you claim. We know you claim. But anyway, he settled the case by paying Jones $850,000 while claiming that it was just to settle the thing once and for all. He didn't want to draw an out trial, and that he still insisted he had done no wrong, at least with her. But given the fact that you acknowledge you've done something with Monica Lewinsky, I'm pretty sure you did something with her. I'm pretty sure. Because if you can't keep your thing in your pants once, you probably ain't going to keep it again. And you're probably not going to keep it in there again. I'm flipping my notes here, so this might take a little bit. This is probably gonna be one of our longer videos. Well, basically, by July, lawyers with Lewinsky and Kenneth Starr basically worked out a full immunity agreement for Lewinsky and her parents. And Starr had actually threatened her parents with prosecution too if they did not cooperate with the prosecution. So they kind of worked out this immunity deal, and it was finalized in July. Now, Starr then launched an independent counsel investigation following the deal being agreed, and this was basically, he sent prosecutors and lawyers to interview both Clinton and Lewinsky individually. They were not interviewed in the same room, never, to keep them separate. Lewinsky gave her testimony before the grand jury of this investigation on August 6th, and Clinton did the same on August 17th. Now, when Clinton was interviewed by the prosecutors and by everything, he actually truthfully acknowledged that he had an extramarital affair with Lewinsky, but he made the comment that nothing was going on between them now, which kind of stood on the factor, well, maybe I did have an affair, but as of right now, no, which was true. The affair was over, but that was not what they were pursuing. Bill, why couldn't you just do it? Why could you not just control yourself? I don't know. Basically, Starr also seized Kenneth Starr ordered that Monica Lewinsky's computer hard drive and her email records they be seized as well for the investigation, and they found even more evidence of possible wrongdoing by Clinton and more evidence of this alleged sexual relationship that they'd had. And it was recorded that they had had at least some kind of form of sexual activity with each other for at least 12 times. And this affair had started sometime in November of 1995. So, Bill, I don't know how you hid this from Hillary. Not that she's much better. But I don't know how you hid this from your wife. But I must say, you were one sneaky little horse. We'll do that. Horse. Anyway, Starr eventually, after these investigations were done, the evidence really gathered, Starr concluded that Clinton had committed perjury. Possibly in the Paula Jones case, but mostly in this case, because he claimed that the perjury was due to the fact that he had a conflicting testimony with Lewinsky's and he then submitted these findings to Congress in what became known as the Starr Report. And basically, this was kind of debated over by the Democrats. They claimed it was politically motivated, that Starr actually spent $70 million just investigating this, so they kind of also criticized, why would you spend that much money on an investigation, which to this day, I don't even really know why that was needed, but that was what the gist was there. Now, this kind of stalled for a slightly bit because the November 1998 elections were coming up, and they kind of wanted to focus on that, so both Democrats and Republicans kind of focused on the elections. And then after the elections were done in November of 1998, they both kind of started debating, both sides in the House of Representatives started to debate over the findings that Starr had done. Did they constitute any crimes or things that the president may have done? And keep in mind, at this time, the House was still Republican majority. The Republicans had the majority in the House, which has the power to impeach. And I guess I ought to say this here with impeachment, how this goes, before we get into everything that went down from there. Impeachment is a process that was set up by the Founding Fathers in the U.S. Constitution in 1787. And this process basically allows it's not only for the president, but any political figure, be it a senator or a representative, that has done wrongdoing and committed crimes while in office or done things against the country, so that they can be removed from that office and basically eliminated out of there if they were doing wrong. And what impeachment does is the House of Representatives has the power to impeach or issue charges. And I want to make that clear here too. When someone is impeached, be it the president, we'll say the president in this example, it does not mean they're automatically removed from office. Impeachment is just formally charging them with a crime. It's not an actual, you're removed from office. Impeachment is just saying you're charged with a crime. You can be impeached and not be removed. So, and as we've seen recently, and as we've seen actually with other cases, such as Andrew Johnson in 1868, and here with Bill Clinton in 1998, 1999, whichever one you want to use. But basically, that's just there. And after the House if the House votes to impeach, the trial has to be held in the Senate. The senators act as jurors, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court acts as the main judge. And that's basically how that goes. Now, if the Senate, in order to convict the president, has to have a majority vote on any one charge. And since the Senate is equally divided with 2 senators per every state, and we have 50 states right now, and even back then, that's 100 senators. In order to convict on a charge, they would need 51 in favor of guilty in order to convict on any charge. That's how that works. If convicted, they can have it. Removal from office, yes, is an option, but at other times it could be something less. But usually it does mean removal from office if they were convicted. And may I point that no president in American history has ever been impeached and removed. Now, Nixon, I know some of you may be thinking in your minds right now, well, what about Nixon? Nixon would have been impeached, but he resigned before that could happen because Nixon realized that if he was impeached, he would be removed. It was just a matter, did he want to draw this out and possibly hurt the country, or he just want to do the right thing and call it and give up now, which he did. And the other presidents that were impeached, they were acquitted. They were not convicted of what they were charged with, which the closest one that I know of coming to Andrew Johnson, who was saved from removal from office by just one vote, and that was back in 1868. Well, basically, the House eventually agreed, after debating over the evidence that Starr had kind of collected and examined in his investigation, to send 3 articles of impeachment for a full House vote. Basically, these charges, this was on December 11th of 1997, and the charges that they came up with were grand jury perjury, and obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. Now, there was a 4th charge that was considered, and that was the perjury in the Paula Jones case, but they ultimately dismissed this as being irrelevant, since this had happened before Clinton had been a president, and that this was not the whole main subject, the point, but they ultimately voted to dismiss that charge. Now, be aware they have to vote on these charges to formally adopt them. So he's not been formally charged yet, but they've come up with charges they're going to vote to see if they should adopt and formally charge him with. The very next day, on December 19th of 1998, Bill Clinton was officially impeached by the House on 2 charges. He was impeached on a charge of perjury to a grand jury by a vote of 228 guilty to 206 not guilty, and obstruction of justice, which was a vote of 221 of a guilty and 212 not guilty. And the other charges failed to pass. The other 2, basically the abuse of power and the other smaller one that had already been kind of dismissed, they still had a vote on that one just to be sure, and that basically didn't pass either. So So Bill Clinton's now officially been impeached. He's been charged with perjury to a grand jury, and he's also been charged with obstruction of justice. And this was in December of 1997, and then Congress went on their recess until the new year. So that kind of put that in place. But by the House impeaching him, it was basically determined that once the Congress resumed in January of 1999, that the trial was going to have to begin in the Senate. And basically, that brings us here to the trial. We're almost done with this. The impeachment trial in the Senate began on January 7th of 1999, with Chief Justice of the United States William Rehnquist presiding as the main judge. And the senators were sworn in on that very day. On that very first day, first of all, the charges against Clinton were formally presented to the Senate, and Rehnquist kind of formally swore in all the senators as jurors. The next day, a resolution this would be on January 8th. The next day, a resolution on rules and procedure was then unanimously adopted, but the question over the witnesses remained. They weren't sure if they needed witnesses. Now, they did already determine that the House, when they done their little debate, they had issued that they were not. When the House was considering the charges, they did not even launch an investigation because they thought, well, Starr already basically did an investigation. I don't think we're going to find much different than what he already did. He already basically did the investigation part for us. And so the House never actually launched an investigation of their own into Clinton. Well, the Senate was kind of torn over the witness issue. They didn't know if they wanted that, or was the evidence that Starr had provided in his investigation and found, was that enough to really go with? And ultimately, it was kind of decided that the witnesses would not be pursued, but they would allow videotapes or any other evidence that Starr collected to be shown at the trial, but no witnesses in themselves. The prosecution's presentation took place on January 14th to 16th during the trial. So the prosecution then gave their little presentation, and they basically argued that the charges that were against Clinton, basically, and the evidence of the wrongdoing by him in this sexual relations case, which Again, Bill, this is why we gotta keep it in, buddy. That's why we gotta keep it in our pants. That's why we must control ourselves. Thank God I don't get around women or have any interest in this. Thank God I have no interest in love, because then I know I personally don't have to ever worry about this, at least me doing it, nor would I ever want to. This is sick. This is honestly, it's sick that people do this. I will say that straight on this video. Anyone that thinks sexual harassment or sexual relationships and you're married and stuff like that, I hate to tell you this, it's sick. It's nasty, it's disgusting, and it's wrong. Stop it. Basically, the prosecution argued that the charges against Clinton and the evidence of wrongdoing by him, that these justified his removal from office and I'm quoting them in this instance, by the willful, premeditated, deliberate corruption of the nation's system of justice through perjury and obstruction of justice. Basically lying that he had the affair in the first place and getting Lewinsky to file a false affidavit, trying to influence her in how she testified. That was kind of put as perjury and the obstruction of justice, trying to block certain people or trying to tell certain people that you repeat my denials if you're called to testify, such as his secretary in the White House. On January 19th to 21st, the defense's presentation took place. Clinton's lawyers testified and made their argument of his defense case. And his defense, Bill Clinton's defense, his lawyers kind of argued, because the president's not actually go to these trials. They have lawyers, a defense team that represents them. They argued that Clinton's grand jury testimony had too many inconsistencies to be considered a clear case of perjury. There was too much that wasn't consistent enough to really be defined as a clear case of it. So they think, well, we can't charge him with perjury if it's not a clear case of it. So you can't do that. There was a couple reasons. So right here's the others. That the investigation and the impeachment was tainted by partisan political bias. It was basically most of the votes that were taking place were around party lines. And since the Republicans had dominated the House, they had really initiated this. It was mostly, if you were Republican, you typically voted that Clinton was guilty. If you were Democrat, you typically voted that he was not guilty. Now, there were a few Republicans and Democrats that I'm sure switched, and there was, for certain, but most of them would vote one way or the other, depending and Clinton was a Democrat president. He was a Democratic president. So, of course, the Democrats, most of them, were not going to vote to impeach him, just as recently, and this is the only time I'm going to mention this, recently with Donald Trump being impeached, it was mostly every Republican but one voted that Trump was not guilty, and almost every Democrat voted that he was guilty. So that's another example that's current day. It was around party lines. Question, basically, and they also put that Clinton's 70% approval rating meant that his ability to govern had not been impaired. By the people still viewed him as fully capable of governing and being president, even though he'd had supposedly this affair. So they argued. So it's not like they argued, well, he might have had this, but it's not affecting his ability to govern, which I suppose kind of makes sense. I mean, even though this was a bad thing that he had done, it wasn't exactly like it was national security threatening. I will say that, but it was still wrong. Don't think that because the federal law doesn't say that you shouldn't be having sexual relations with a woman when you're married or something like that, or inappropriate. Just don't think because the federal law states that it's wrong, and all that. Don't think that means, well, that means you can't govern, because it doesn't. But it's still wrong. And basically meant his ability. I beg your pardon. I've already read that. The prosecution finally also presented. Well, not the prosecution. The defense kind of said that the prosecution had presented an unsubstantial, circumstantial case that didn't even meet the constitutional standards for removal. That this case was not even befitting for that kind of a thing. This was the final argument that his defense team made. The questions from both prosecution and defense were then taken over the next few days by the Chief Justice and by the senators. They kind of asked them questions, and they were allowed to answer. with what they knew. And on January 25th, a move was made to dismiss the charges in general of the obstruction of justice and the perjury by Democratic Senator Robert Byrd, but this ultimately failed, as did the witness testimony, which I mentioned before. They did not pass. And to make up for this witness testimony, the trial's not only going to go on, they put an alternative, and that was from February 1st to 3rd of 1999, tapes of the conversations with Lewinsky that Kenneth Starr's prosecution had taken with her, of their conversations with her, and others supposed witnesses that they had kind of interviewed. They were played in the Senate, and the closing arguments were then issued on February 8th. They showed these tapes. In one of them, there was actually, like, every 30 seconds, it was a new audio of Lewinsky in a separate saying, almost concurring with what she had said multiple times, that there was an affair. And on February 12th, basically, before we get there, the Senate then closed the trial, the closing arguments, basically, on February 8th. That's the end of the jury. Now it's time to vote. Is the president guilty, and is he going to be removed from office? So here was the verdict, basically. On February 12th of 1999, the Senate convened to vote on whether to remove Bill Clinton from presidential office. On Article 1, which was the charge of the grand jury perjury, the Senate voted not guilty. It acquitted Clinton on this charge by a vote of 55 voting not guilty, with 45 voting guilty. The first charge, that's perjury, so he's been cleared of the perjury in this case. And Article 2, the obstruction of justice. The Senate tied a vote with this one. Remember, there are 100 senators in the Senate. The vote was 50-50. They were evenly split. Although this was a tie, due to the Constitution law that when they wrote the impeachment and said it had to be a majority, even though this was a tie, since it did not have that majority. A majority would have been a 51-49 at the closest it could have been. Since this was not a majority, Clinton was acquitted on this charge too and found not guilty. But this was the one he came closest on, was the obstruction of justice, trying to influence the testimonies, trying to making her file the false affidavit and everything. That was what the obstruction of justice charge was, kind of, in a way. Although so basically Clinton has been acquitted. The trial's done. He's been acquitted. He was impeached, and Clinton actually apologized a couple days after for the trouble and bother that this had caused the American people, and it slowly went on its way. So the trial's now done, the impeachment drama done. So this is the end to the impeachment. But we have one more thing here that kind of came up afterward. Clinton was not done with Paula Jones. Well, with the case, Jones was done with him. The judge was not. Although Clinton had been acquitted, and I'm reading this basically from here, he was issued a contempt of court citation in April of 1999. This is about 2 months after the impeachment trial had ended, by District Judge Susan Weber Wright for his willful, and this is in her words, willful failure to obey her willful failure was the term that she used, to obey her orders to testify truthfully in the Paula Jones case. She had been the judge in that case, and it kind of became evident that Clinton, yes, did commit perjury in that case. He did not tell the whole truth. And basically, the judge demanded that Clinton pay $90,000 fine as a consequence of this. Well, Clinton eventually kind of negotiated with them a little bit here, and eventually he got it down that he would pay a $25,000 fine to settle this. And he would also have his Arkansas law license suspended for 5 years. That he could not participate in law of any type in Arkansas or anything with that matter, or in the government, for 5 years. And this plea deal that he took, he eventually actually took it just 1 day before he left office. He took the deal the day before he left office, so he left office on January 21st of 2001. Clinton took this deal on January 20th, the very day before. After the trial, basically after this whole impeachment drama, many Americans still highly like Clinton as a president. And honestly, if you look at his overall track record, just kind of cut out the impeachment right here. Just don't think of this part. Don't think of the pants issue. Don't think of him having sexual affairs. Or as I quote Clinton again, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. Yeah, you did, whether you like it or not. Well, after the trial, many Americans, and if you look at his track record, it was overall good. Clinton accomplished a lot in his presidency. He was actually the first president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt to win a second term at office. That was a Democrat. Because before this, every other Democrat that had run between them had either died before they could complete a second term or even get one, or had chose not to run for one, or lost a re-election. Well, basically, they still highly viewed Clinton as good and overall a good president and leader, but many Americans did state that their view of his honesty and trustworthiness was, although not entirely hurt, it was somewhat hurt by the fact that he had this affair and lied about it. And many Americans, they also believe that the trial had been very bad for America because it caught up a couple of months. It basically caught up all 1998 in politics. And basically argued this was just bad for America because it divided people along party lines. People were either for impeaching him or they were against impeaching him. It just divided the country, which is to this day, even with Donald Trump's, it really just, that figure still stands. People more view impeachment is more harmful than it is good. And even back through history, we kind of see in any government that's done impeachment that a lot of them kind of they don't want to do impeachment, and it's happens so rarely, partly because it's just so bothersome to want to do. It's just so troublesome. It can be so lumbersome and cumbersome of a process that it just aggravates the heck out of the nation. So basically, that is the end of the Bill Clinton impeachment. Now, I will try to find some sources and post those videos or links in there to the main channel page as soon as I can. I will try to find some in there. But basically on that, if you have any questions on the impeachment, feel free to put them in the comments or anything, and maybe I can still answer them. I may have forgotten something here, but I'm sure I can answer it for you. I learned stuff in this video as well, because although I knew Clinton got impeached, and I knew some of the stuff, I never actually knew about the tie vote on the obstruction of justice charge, and I never knew some of the other things as well about the case that it really brought out. Well, I did not know nothing about the Paul Jones case, so this was kind of interesting for me as well. Basically, that's all for this topic. Now, as I stated at the very beginning of the video, I will be doing a video on the Spanish flu on either Thursday or Friday. I have yet to really look at that yet. I will announce that when it gets closer as to what the final decision is, but I will be looking at that. Basically, that's all for this video. So if you like this video, be sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, whatever on that end. Put any comments down below of what you thought or anything like that. Feel free again to put any suggestions for topics that you want to hear, because that's my goal here, is not just to do what I want to put on here personally, but I definitely want to include you, the audience, just as much at every point of the way as I can. I don't want to make it all my way, so if you have any ideas, feel free at any time to tell me of what any topic you might have of interest of me doing to hear about. So basically, that's all for this video. Hopefully everyone continues to be safe from the coronavirus. I myself here am still safe, even though my home state here of Ohio actually now has 67 cases, but we're going to hopefully stay in the clear zone. Hopefully everyone will, and I hope that you all have a good night. So be safe, keep well, and avoid getting sick, and just remember, the next time that a president has impeachment with a problem with keeping his pants on, just remember, we can all copy Bill Clinton and say we did not have sexual relations with that woman. I did not tell anyone to lie, not a single time. Yeah, you did! But anyways, have a good night, and hope to see you all next time.